This movie is neither about a superhero's action, a scientific quest to rescue the world, or a philosophical tale of a highly intelligent philosopher. It is a story full of emotions, a father that would go to any length to keep his son alive. It is the story of millions of people all over the world. A story of humanity. Let's get started. The movie opens on a broad highway with a pretty girl driving a car while enjoying music in her ride. She overtook a truck, but another truck was approaching in front of her, so she sped up her car. This trick didn't work, and the back of the car collided into the approaching truck. The car turned on the road and the first truck smashed her. The next scene shows a couple, John and his wife Denise, watching the news at night. The American economy is in decline. Eventually, John hears some voices. He runs outside and finds that the cops are seizing his wife's car since they did not pay the bank's debt. Denise is unhappy because her car has been taken and they do not have the money to retrieve it. We may estimate that they are mediocre, living on the edge of struggle, yet not being extremely poor. Denise works in a restaurant, which I believe she dislikes. John reassures her that he will receive his cash shortly and that everything will be okay. At this moment, their son Mike arrives. He is a die-hard WWE fan who aspires to be a wrestler in the future. I can see a loving tie in the family. The next day, all three family members are driving to work in John's car. Mike to school, Dennis to the restaurant. Music is being played in the car. They are laughing and joking. I particularly like this scene because it conveys the notion that no matter what your circumstances are, you can be happy or find happiness in your family. Mike despises goodbyes because when John drops him off to school and says goodbye, Mike argues that he should say, "See you later." Goodbyes really hurt. John works as a part-time laborer at a steel mill with his friend Jimmy. John is well qualified, and we later learn that he is chasing a higher job. He is going to conduct an interview for such a post. They discover that there are 400 applicants for one opening. Jimmy informs him that no one will be hired and that HR would offer the position to one of their relatives. HR rejects him on the grounds that he is overqualified. John returns home. The next day is Sunday, and they attend church like any other devout family. After that, they will attend Mike's baseball game. This was all part of their daily routine, and they were content with it. However, this Sunday was not a nice day for them because Mike collapsed while playing baseball. He is taken to the hospital. Only parents could understand the emotions and the anguish that John and Denise were experiencing. Denise was so upset that she was not enabling nurses to do their duties correctly. A nurse informed them to provide blood sample. They would certainly admit Mike. The hospital receptionist fills out a medical document. Meanwhile, Jimmy and his wife arrive at the hospital. They all were unaware of the calamity that awaits them. After a few seconds, Mike was stable but unable to talk. A doctor was examining the graphs on the ventilator and told Denise that Mike's blood pressure is now at 88, and that if it drops below 70, Mike will die. Meanwhile, hospital director Rebecca, senior cardiologist Turner, and a lady doctor, Allen, were assessing the fact that John works part-time and Denise works in a restaurant. Therefore, they are poor. When John and Denise entered the management faculty room, they were informed that Mike requires a heart transplant. Turner describes Mike's abnormal cardiac position to them. Denise refuses to believe it because Mike was completely fit in the previous 24 hours, but the doctor elaborates that it is tough to accept. But the alternative is to bring Mike home and wait for his death. This was the second breathtaking scene in the film that definitely ought to be seen. After hearing of the loss of his beloved son, John decides to have heart surgery, which would cost $250,000, but he seems decisive. Turner stated that Mike's blood group is BS, therefore finding a donor will be easy. But Rebecca interrupts, saying that it's not that simple, the procedure is too expensive. John assures Rebecca that he has insurance that covers Mike as well, but Rebecca rejects this and states that his insurance does not cover Mike. John insisted, and she said they would recheck the insurance file. But in the meantime, they had to deposit cash, and to get on the donor list, they will have to deposit a 30% down payment, which was nearly $75,000 at the time. John only has $1,000 in his bank account. Their kid was dying, but the hospital director was solely interested in money. John and Denise are leaving the management room, disappointed, when Alan informs them that this is the only top hospital for heart transplant operation. Thus, they should avoid transferring Mike to another hospital. She advised them to contact his insurance company or the Children's Aid Ministry, since both have funds, but Mike had to be at this hospital if they wanted to see him alive. From that point forward, John is on a quest to save his child. First, he goes to HR to discuss his insurance coverage, but to John's surprise, HR informs him that his insurance policy could only provide $20,000 and it does not cover health. John protests that his son is ill and would die if he is not placed on the donor list. The HR officer is not cooperating. John contacts his state services to obtain funds, but receives no good reaction. One day, he receives notification from his insurance company that his appeal has been approved. He hurries to Rebecca, happy that he has finally received consent. Rebecca informs him that he completed wrong paperwork. The new policy did not include any reimbursement for transplant. Disappointment, grief, and powerlessness, oh my. The ordinary poor man has no place in the world. In this situation, they do what any other impoverished person would do. They begin gathering funds from their friends. However, poor people have poor friends, therefore, after the donation campaign, John was able to raise $4,000. 75 grand seems like a long way off. He began selling his home appliances. Jimmy advises that he should disclose his problem to a well-known reporter. People will help him. We can see the selfishness of humans here, as a man buys a color TV for under $20. They pay a visit to Tuck, a news reporter in the evening, and tell him about their plight. But Tuck merely expresses sympathy and does not offer any help. He was able to collect 16 grand after selling all of his home appliances, and even sold his diamond ring for only $90. Some people take advantage of a person's helplessness. The world is brutal, and materialism rules it. He gave the hospital $6,000, but meanwhile, he received a call from Denise, who told him with extreme emotions that the hospital is going to discharge Mike. Shocked and offended, John rushed to the hospital, where he encountered Turner, who was conversing with a wealthy man who was also awaiting a heart surgery. Turner's behavior was quite different with this wealthy customer. John requests a private meeting with him since he knows Turner made the decision to expel Mike. In the room, John argues Turner that they perform 300 procedures each year and make millions of dollars. Why can't they perform just one surgery in the sake of humanity? Turner refuses to assist and asserts that he does not establish policies. But this time, John didn't request him. Instead, he put a revolver on his chest and asked him to do what he say, otherwise he will kill him. Turner grew terrified when he saw a firearm. John enters the emergency ward and locks the entrance door. Other people fled when they saw the pistol, but John quickly locked the door and just a few individuals remained inside. They were now his hostages. One of them was a couple, Mitch and Julie, who were harmed in an accident because Mitch was drunk. An immigrant mother, Rosa, carrying a child, Lester, whose finger has been injured. Another couple, Steve and Miriam, is expecting a child. The hostage also included hospital staff like a fat security guard Max without a weapon, Alan, the nurse, and a junior doctor. In the emergency room, John cut the lift supply and smashed the surveillance camera. But a security guard catches him doing this. He calls the cops. The cops arrived quickly. Lieutenant Frank, a police negotiator, contacts John and threatens him. But John is prepared for this and demands that Rebecca should enlist Mike. Frank then tries to emotionally blackmail him, but John is difficult to catch. Inside the hospital, Miriam is sobbing due to pain. Alan tries to console her and her husband, who is also concerned. John speaks politely to him and asks what he is anticipating. He says that he only wants his child to be healthy. Who can feel this other than John? A child's health. Denise is with Mike, whose blood pressure is steadily dropping. A kind doctor is actively inspecting him, and he offers him a bodybuilding toy, which gives me hope that not every doctor is like Turner. Some people have humanity. Meanwhile, Gus, the head of police, arrives on the scene looking more like a superstar. It is also clear that Gus has a strained relationship with Frank. All of the captives in the ER are now acquainted with one another. One of the nurses stated that Michael's sickness might have been noticed much earlier during a normal exam, but the doctor ignored it in order to get a reward from the insurance company for keeping his mouth shut so that the corporation could continue to profit. This was the horrible news that caused captives to sympathize with John, while also reflecting on the inadequacies in America's healthcare system. John was waiting for a miracle, as now only a miracle can save Mike's life. Here we see the flashback of an accident, which happened in first scene. Frank contacts John and asks him that if he could release some hostages now, but John insists on first putting Mike's name on the list. But during the call, Alan informed him that Miriam needed to be transferred to the delivery ward. Unwillingly, John offers to release some of the captives, but Mitch attacks him, and Julie assists John in subduing and handcuffing Mitch. John releases pregnant couple Steve and Miriam, as well as Rosa. They all show their support for John to the television teams outside. Rebecca informs Denise that they have decided to put Mike's name in the list. It was just a trap, so Denise can call John and they could convince him to release hostages. Gus is purely focused on protecting his image, and as a chief, he does not want to communicate with a criminal. As a result, he has his own strategy on how to capture John. He thus plans to distract John, using Frank and Rebecca's plan. Gus infiltrates an officer through an air vent. My condition was very critical, so their call was very emotional. Everyone, including medical staff in the room and public outside, was shedding tears as John chatted with Mike. Rebecca has also softened and is whimpering now. She has realized her cruelty, and now her heart has been changed. Just as the sniper fires, John comes across the hacked news clip, hurting him in the shoulder. John defeats the sniper in front of a cheering crowd and uses him as a human shield to reiterate his demands. Guys, buckle up. The most emotional and suspenseful scenes will now begin. John will kill himself, will donate his heart and save his son. This was his only demand now. Everyone was stunned shocked. However, John convinces Turner to carry out the procedure in Jolie, and the security guard Max attests to his intentions. He says his goodbyes to Mike, bid him last words. He is ready to shoot himself in the head with the only bullet he brought. Yes, his rifle was constantly empty. Meanwhile, the accident girl has died. Her body has been sent to the hospital for a post-mortem examination. This was the miracle for which John had been waiting, but he is now oblivious and ready to die. When Rebecca discovers that the dead girl's heart matched Mike's, she becomes excited and informs Denise. She doesn't believe it at first, but she wants to tell John. John picked the walkie-talkie but did not speak, since he believed his wife would prevent him from dying. Denise dashes towards the operating room to deliver the news that the heart will be there in 15 minutes. The scene ends here. In next scene, we see that John releases the hostages. Lester then poses as John and turns himself in to the police. As John enters the operating room with Michael, Frank, who has seen the switch, allows John to watch Mike's treatment before arresting him. John is disguised as a surgeon. 3 months later, John's actions have sparked a national debate about healthcare. John is ultimately convicted guilty of kidnapping and unjust incarceration, but not of attempted murder or armed criminal conduct. The movie ends with a very emotional yet motivational note. Lester deemed John as his hero, and Mike is now fully recovered. This film is an indictment of government policies and institutions. There is legislation for everyone, but regulations only protect the upper class, while the middle class is constantly neglected, even below the line of humanity. A man devoid of humanity is an animal. Yes, it also reminds me of a famous quote from George Orwell's Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Please don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe. Comment below what you want to see us work on next.